We're going to get started here, and normally the mayor might use a gavel here, but when you got a bunch of clerks in the front row, you're going to get a little more of a gentle approach. So, yeah. So welcome everyone to the 2026 Municipal Election Candidate Information Session, or as we like to generally call it, Municipal Election Law 101. You're in for a 2-hour session here about all things municipal election law, and I guarantee you we will not cover every subject here today. There's so much to learn about running as a candidate. It's quite a complicated thing when you look at all the various different pieces of legislation, policy, and bylaws that might be applicable here today, but we're going to try to do our best to make sure that happens. So if we move to the next slide, we've got some general introductions for who's here today. We're really pleased to have the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. So we got Peter and Lilith from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs. Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and so we're very happy that they're going to be presenting with us today momentarily. And then for the clerk's office, City Clerk Kathy Ritchie is here with us. I'm Deputy Clerk Joel Watts, Deputy Clerk Sarah O'Connell, and then our election supervisor Lois Jackson. And between the four of us, we couldn't count how many municipal elections we've done, but there's a wealth of experience in the room here, and it's mostly with these two right here, but we're really happy to have everyone here. We do want to acknowledge Ron Taylor, CAO. He can't be in attendance today, neither could Sarah Bukaboom. She is our Director of Corporate Services. She's also acting as the election auditor, so she does have an election function, but we'll address their roles as we progress through the slides today. So basically how the approach today will be is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs is going to do their presentation first. It's quite substantial. We're going to try to get through as much as we can. And then the City of Kawartha Lakes will have our presentation, because basically their presentation is applicable to any municipal election across Ontario, but there are some things that are unique to Kawartha Lakes' municipal election that are a little bit different. And so we'll explain some of those differences in ours, and then hopefully there will be an opportunity for questions, but we're going to hold to our time pretty clearly at 6 o'clock. And if you're uncomfortable with using the microphone to speak, this meeting is on YouTube today. If you'd rather just speak with us one-on-one, you can speak with us after the meeting, and we'll try to take down some of the good questions that would be beneficial to have for all the candidates, so that we can circulate an answer so that everyone can hear kind of the question and answer, but in a more simple and intimate way rather than standing at the podium. So I think that leads us to Peter and Lilith, so you can welcome them to the podium.
Yeah, it should work now. Okay. Hello everyone, my name is Lilith Karapetian, as Joel said. I'm a municipal advisor with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and I have my colleague Peter Sizov, a senior municipal advisor. I'd like to thank City of Kawartha Lakes for hosting this candidate session. A little bit about us. We are regional staff based in Kingston, and we are not the policy folks or lawyers, and our presentation provides high-level information on Municipal Elections Act and some requirements. And if you have specific questions about your local bylaws, again, you can see your clerk afterwards. Okay, I'll use the clicker now. Here we are. Let me see. Oh, here. So today's session covers roles in municipal government, candidate eligibility, nomination, key dates, campaign rules, and finances. So we'll also speak about voting procedures, compliance, and we also have some key reference materials included. Sorry. I'm doing it wrong. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Here we are. Okay. So we'll now walk through the respective roles and responsibilities of elected officials and municipal staff. As you know, the local government is the level of government closest to people, and it plays direct role in shaping everyday life in our communities. Serving in council is a 4-year term and involves significant responsibility, hard work, and difficult decisions. With the context, we'll begin by looking at the roles of elected officials and municipal staff before moving into the Municipal Elections Act. First, let me start by saying that Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction, and each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. The Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities, which seeks to balance local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. Section 224 of the Municipal Act sets out the role of municipal council. First, council represents the public and is responsible for developing and evaluating municipal policies and programs. Another key responsibility is deciding which services the municipality needs to provide. Council also ensures that the right administrative and financial controls are in place. I'm sorry, can you do it? Here we are, thank you. Okay, so role of head of council. Can you go one back? Yeah, okay, perfect. It's not okay. Yeah, can we go to slide 7, please? And now slide 8. Oh, I see. Role of head of council, maybe? Okay. So now let's take a look at the role of the head of council. Under Section 225 of the Municipal Act, the head of council acts as the chief executive officer of the municipality. The role includes presiding over council meetings, providing leadership to council, representing the municipality in official functions, and carrying out any assigned duties under the Act or other legislation. Next one, please. Although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, the head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of the council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters during the council meetings. The head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. It is important to note that generally, council makes decisions, not any individual council member, including the head of council. However, there are 216 municipalities that are subject to the strong mayor framework, whose heads of councils have been given authority to make certain decisions. This will be covered in greater detail in the coming slides. Next one. As mentioned, in some municipalities, the head of council has additional powers and duties, known as strong mayor powers. These additional strong mayor powers and duties apply to the head of council in any designated municipality. These additional powers and duties for heads of council apply only to designated municipalities. The list of those that have been delegated can be found in Ontario Regulation 530/22. Some strong mayor powers are related to provincial priorities identified in regulations under the Municipal Act, which are build 1.5 million new residential units by December 31st, and construct and maintain infrastructure to support housing, including transit, roads, utilities, and servicing. Next one, please. This slide here provides an overview of the strong mayor powers and duties, and at a high level, these powers relate to areas such as staff direction, governance, and budgeting. Next one. The next few slides outline the roles of council as described in the Councilor's Guide. The first role we'll look at is the representative role. As a councillor, you are elected to represent your constituent views on issues that come before council. Many decisions require balancing competing interests, and councillors are expected to use their judgment to act in the best interest of the municipality as a whole, taking into account long-term considerations. Next one. Moving on from the representative role, the next role is the policy-making role. Some council decisions are routine, while others establish general principles to guide future actions. These are often considered policy decisions. As shown on this slide here, policy making generally involves identifying an issue, setting objectives, directing staff to research options, and where appropriate, consulting the public. Council reviews the information, considers factors such as costs, implementation timelines, and then decides on a course of action. Once adopted, staff are responsible for implementing the policy. Moving to the third role, that would be stewardship role. The next slide. Yeah. In this role, council is responsible for ensuring that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are used appropriately, efficiently, and as intended. Next one. Now that we have covered council's responsibilities, it's important to look at the role of the Chief Administrative Officer, often referred to the CAO. Under Section 229 of the Municipal Act, a municipality may appoint a CAO who is responsible for the general control and management of the municipality's affairs to help ensure efficient and effective operations, as well as any other duties assigned by council. In many ways, the CAO's role is similar to that of a chief operating officer in a business setting. The CAO is responsible for general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administrative practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operations of the municipality. Now let's turn to the role of municipal staff. Next slide. Under Section 227 of the Municipal Act, staff are responsible for implementing council's decisions, establishing administrative practices and procedures, and providing research and advice to council on municipal policies and programs, and carrying out duties required by legislation and or assigned by the municipality. Now let's talk about council-staff relationship and roles. Next slide. The Councilor's Guide provides useful guidance on how council and staff can work together effectively, and this slide provides high-level overview of the relationship. Council and staff have distinct but complementary roles within the municipality. Council represents the community and sends policy direction, while staff provide advice and manage resources to implement council's decisions. Next, we will briefly review accountability and transparency requirements for municipalities and members of council. Ontario municipalities and members of councils operate under a legislated accountability and transparency framework that includes rules for the municipalities and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency is one of the council's roles under Section 224 of the MA and is a priority in maintaining public trust. Another important consideration for municipalities is the adoption of codes of conduct. Next one, for members of council and certain local boards. Codes of conduct usually set out expectations and standards for councilor conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of council's term. Municipalities are required to establish a code of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which must include certain subject matter. This could include gifts, benefits, hospitality, respectful conduct, confidential information, use of municipal or local board property, and equipment. Next one. In addition to these requirements, municipalities must also ensure access to an integrity commissioner. The integrity commissioner's role is to perform, in an independent manner, the functions assigned by council with respect to applying the local codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, applying local procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members, and applying certain MCIA, Municipal Conflict of Interest Act rules, to members. Next one, please. The information I just provided about codes of conduct and integrity commissioner frameworks under the Municipal Act is the current framework. As you may have heard, the Municipal Accountability Act, or Bill 9, received royal assent on June 2nd, 2026. The changes made through this act are not yet in effect. An order of the Lieutenant Governor in Council naming the date would be needed to bring it into effect. Next one. To help support integrity and accountability in public office, municipalities may pass bylaws to appoint certain accountability officers, municipal ombudsman, auditor general, lobbyist registrar, and a closed meeting investigator. The Ontario Ombudsman has a role with respect to municipalities. Next slide. This role builds on the local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. The Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received or on the Ombudsman's own initiative. Although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to Council and the municipality as part of their report. It is up to the municipality whether and how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. Next one, please. Personal privacy and other confidentiality issues are an important practical and legal considerations for municipal councillors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, or MFIPA, is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. Next slide. Our next slide outlines the 4 types of school boards established under the Education Act. School trustees are members of the school board. They are locally elected representatives of the public, and they are the community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take actions. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions or concerns about their local school. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about duties and commitments. The role of school board, next one. Board's trustee is to establish policy direction, participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interest of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, Ministry of Education, and families. Next slide. Okay, having outlined these roles, the next topic is eligibility. Who can put their name forward as a candidate? First, looking at municipal office eligibility and ineligibility. You must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote, so the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as eligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you are qualified to hold that office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act, or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold the office. If a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. An employee of a municipality who wants to run for an office in a different municipality does not have to take a leave of absence or resign, but they should check with their employer to see if there are any policies that could affect them. Next slide, please. Looking at school board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. If you are an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any school board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. The following people here are disqualified from being elected as a school trustee. First, cannot be a clerk, deputy clerk, treasurer, or deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board, any person not eligible to vote in the municipality, an employee of a school board unless they take an unpaid leave of absence and resign if elected. Also, like the ineligibility for municipal office, that is, a judge of any court, a member of the Legislative Assembly of Ontario, a senator or a member of the House of Commons, an inmate of a penal or correctional institution under sentence of imprisonment. Next one. We'll now move to the nomination process. As you know, for the 2026 municipal elections, the first day to file a nomination was May 1st. Nomination day is the final deadline to file the nomination. And for this election year, the deadline is Friday, August 21st at 2 p.m. It's also important to be aware of the rules around withdrawing your nomination. Local election policies may state a candidate must personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they are still required to file a campaign financial statements covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money, nor raised any funds, they can click on the box there, sign the form, and it is complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial statements by the required deadline. Next slide, please. So starting on May 1st until the close of business, August 21st, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. Candidates must complete Form 1, that's the nomination paper, and then submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. The clerk can ask you to show identification or fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. If there is a ward system, as long as you are eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you will not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. If there is electronic filing, use of electronic filing for candidates or third-party advertisers is in the clerk's discretion. The clerk also has authority to determine what methods could be used to file electronically. Councils do not have the authority to order the clerk to use electronic filing. Even if the clerk permits electronic filing, all campaign documents require original signatures. If electronic filing is permitted, it is the responsibility of the candidate or third-party advertiser to maintain these original records until after the next regular elections, that would be 2030. The first day that a candidate may file a nomination or that a third-party advertiser may register, as we said, was May 1st. Next one, please. Occasionally, a candidate changes their mind and decides to run for a different office. You can run for only one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they have already collected their 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign and only one financial statement needs to be filed. Next one. The next item to cover is third-party advertising. A third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support or oppose a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. A third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Next one. Only the following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration. That would be an individual who is normally resident in Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. In addition to who may register, the slide here also outlines the persons and entities that are ineligible to file a notice of registration. Next one. Municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on Form 2. Regulation 101/97 provides an exemption to these requirements for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate, and they are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who is eligible to vote in the municipality, not just in that ward. Both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the document, then they could be held accountable under the penalty section of the MEA. Of course, if the candidate wishes, they can also provide more than 25 signatures. And candidates should remember that even if electronic filing is permitted, they are required to obtain 25 original signatures endorsing their nomination. Next one, please. As we discussed earlier, individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertiser. There is no registration fee for third-party advertiser. A third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per Section 88(6). Once registered, they may advertise in support of or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in that municipality. This would include council, trustee, and directly elected upper-tier candidates. Next one. As we discussed, the third-party advertisers may end their campaign by filing a written withdrawal with the clerk at any time prior to the end of the registration period for third-party advertisers. The registration period for third-party advertisers runs until Friday before voting day. The third-party advertisers' registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. This means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file their nomination. I will now pass it over to my colleague, Peter Sizev, to speak to campaign finances. That's more interesting than my part. So.
Hello, everybody. Can folks hear me okay? Yeah, wonderful. So as Loet mentioned, campaign finances can be a very interesting chapter of this presentation because this is the topic we tend to get the most questions about because it is technical. There are quite a few details to go over. So please bear with me as I delve into this field. Next slide, please. So the first topic to start with is contributions. And the key takeaway from this slide is that you only need a campaign bank account if you as a candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So if no money is involved, there's no need to set one up. That's the first key thing to note. The other important fact here is that third-party advertisers generally have to follow the same rules as candidates when it comes to raising campaign funds and reporting financially. Municipalities are also required to set their own rules about using municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. These rules should already be in effect, and it's very important for candidates to check in with their municipality to find out more about these local approaches. Next slide, please. So more on contributions. The key thing to note here is that contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to have come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. So we also at this point want to clarify the rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor or more. So one of the criteria is that if one corporation controls the others directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. Also, if the corporations are owned or controlled by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. Next slide, please. So there are certain groups or individuals that from which candidates or third-party advertisers can't collect contributions. So on the slide you see a few examples, but generally in a summarized way, it's political parties, provincial, federal, different orders of government are included in that as well, like municipalities, but also school boards, and a business or group that's not a corporation. And that last one is particularly relevant to third-party advertising campaigns, where only corporations and trade unions that are in Ontario can contribute. So on this slide, while we're on the slide, we can also say a few things about volunteers. And firstly, the value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution, but there is a bit of an exception. So for instance, if a professional like an accountant or a lawyer volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and as a campaign expense. And again, just to underscore this point here, trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. Next slide, please. More on contributions. So, just to be clear, campaign contributions are monies, goods, or services given to a candidate for their election campaign or given and accepted by another person who is acting under the candidate's direction. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25, and contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. So, fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name and address of the contributor and the amount and date. Next slide. So now we're moving on to contribution limits. The limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to contributors, just for full transparency. Next slide. Now, there's also the notion of self-funding limits, and the self-funding limit for municipal council candidates is based on a number of electors voting for the office to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. This amount includes any contribution of goods, such as inventory from a previous campaign. And the formula for calculating the limit tends to differ between the head of council's office and other council seats. So for example, for the head of council, the limit is calculated by starting with $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector. And for other council seats, it's $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector. Now, just to reiterate an important point, the highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is $25,000. If the formula works out to a number that's over $25,000, you as a candidate, for example, would still have that $25,000 as your ceiling. If, of course, logically the formula works out to less than $25,000, then you receive whatever that number is as your self-funding limit. Next slide, please. A few words about borrowing. So candidates can use their own money to open a campaign bank account, but they cannot loan money to their campaign expecting to get it all back later. The only way to get that startup money back is after the campaign period ends and before filing the financial statement, when the candidate or their spouse can be repaid from any leftover campaign funds. In other words, any surplus money. You cannot take a campaign loan from family members or from any business or corporate accounts you have access to. It's really important to emphasize here that loans can only be borrowed from a bank or other recognized lending institution in Ontario and must be directed into your campaign bank account. So a loan itself doesn't count as campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantees the loan and the campaign doesn't repay it all, the unpaid balance counts as a contribution. That means you need to stay within the contribution limits for the candidate and spouse. Any interest the campaign pays on a loan does count as a campaign expense. Next slide, please. More on expenses. So campaign expenses are basically any costs you or someone working for you, like your campaign manager, incurs while running your campaign. And just as a quick reminder, the nomination fee is a personal expense, not a campaign one, so it should not be included in your campaign financial statement. All campaign expenses should be paid out of your campaign bank account. And if you put something on a credit card, make sure to keep clear records showing that the campaign reimbursed you. And this is a very critical point, something we get asked about all the time. So I just wanted to highlight it here. Now, any taxes like HST should be included as part of the expense amount. And you only incur campaign expenses during the official campaign period, except for auditor-related fees or costs. If you need an auditor's report, you can pay for that after the campaign ends, and those costs still need to be reported on your financial statement. Next slide, please. Candidates and third-party advertisers should understand the rules for campaign expenses. Donated goods and services count as expenses and must be reported at fair market value with a receipt. All campaign expenses must be paid from the campaign bank account, and receipts showing payment details must be kept. Every expense has to be reported on the required financial disclosure form filed with the clerk. But more on that later. If you reuse leftover items from a past campaign, like your signs or any supplies, you must record their current market value as an expense. If you end this campaign with leftover items and keep them for future use, storage costs are a personal, not campaign expense. Thought I'd raise that just in case. Next slide. Now, a few words about spending limits. The spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 101/97. And as you can see here, we have in this table for the general spending calculations for somebody running for the head of council seat or all other offices, and like in the earlier slides, we see a difference in how the formula is calculated. The head of council has a slightly different calculation with a higher base number, $7,500 versus $5,000 for any other office. And in the second column of this table, you also see that there is a separate spending limit for after voting day activities like parties or gifts or expressions of appreciation, and that's calculated as 10% of your general spending limit. Next slide. So when you file your nomination, the clerk will give you an estimate of your general spending limit. This estimate will be based on the number of electors in the previous election. On or before September 30th, 2026, the clerk must give you a final general spending limit, which is based on the number of electors on the voters list for the current election. If the spending limit estimate that you received when you filed your nomination is higher than the final spending limit you receive in September, the estimate becomes your official spending limit, just in case you were worried about that. So whichever number is higher is the spending limit, and the clerk's calculation is final. In other words, it can't be appealed. Next slide, please. So on this slide, it's important to note that most expenses are subject to the spending limit, but there are a few that aren't. So just to name a few examples, those are holding a fundraising event or activity, expenses related to your campaign bank account. If we work down the list, we also see audit and accounting fees. And another example is expenses related to a compliance audit. So another point of clarification here, expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. So campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. Similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information to make campaign contributions does not qualify as a fundraising function. Next slide, please. So when we're talking about spending limits for third-party advertisers, we're once again looking at an Ontario provincial regulation, 10197, which provides the formula. And for third-party advertisers, it's calculated with $5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of $25,000. And it's noteworthy that the formula used is based on the number of electors entitled to vote in an election in the municipality. Under the Municipal Elections Act, there's also a spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day, which is 10% of the general spending limit, and this is also for third-party advertisers. So you can kind of see how there are certain similarities between the rules for candidates for council and third-party advertisers when it comes to calculating these types of limits. Next slide, please. So campaign financial rules can be found in sections noted on the slide from the Municipal Elections Act, the principal piece of legislation that we're dealing with when we're talking about municipal elections. This and the next several slides will walk you through the campaign finance rules in additional detail. Now, whether you're running as a candidate or acting as a third-party advertiser, it's really important to understand your responsibilities when it comes to campaign spending and accepting contributions. One question we tend to receive every election is, for example, do I need a chief financial officer? And in case anybody was pondering that question, the answer is no, not for municipal elections. That said, we strongly recommend that you take some time to review the sections of the Municipal Elections Act on this slide, along with the financial statements you'll be required to file with your clerk, because knowing these rules up front will make it much easier to keep your records organized and report everything correctly. Next slide, please. So this takes us to the record-keeping section of the presentation. Candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all campaign financial records until after the council in the 2030 election has been sworn and takes office. These rules apply whether you're elected or not. Another critical point to highlight on the slide. The clerk must also keep all campaign finance records until after the 2030 council has been sworn in. Next slide, please. More on record keeping. So our encouragement to everyone is to keep all receipts in a safe place because they're highly important records. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or their designate, numbered in order, and ideally issued in copies. So one for the contributor and one for your own records. Another good practice to remember is to use a campaign bank account that provides monthly statements and copies of canceled checks. For every deposit, keep a copy of the deposit slip showing who contributed and how much. If you use petty cash for small expenses, do keep invoices for each purchase and make sure the cash on hand plus invoices always equal the original petty cash amount. Also, refill the fund by check from the campaign bank account. Now, as I was mentioning earlier, it's helpful to review your financial statements well in advance. So for instance, Form 4, this is a prescribed form, is a financial statement for candidates, whereas Form 8 is the equivalent for third-party advertisers. So looking at these forms in advance may save a lot of headaches because there are quite a few things that need to be accounted for. Some campaign records, like ads, must be kept for public review for 4 years. So this is another concept to remember. Next slide. So a few words about campaign ads. The period for third-party advertisements, as shown on the slide, is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers apply, naturally. And in 2026, this is from May 1st, 2026, until the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 26th, 2026. An important thing to note here is that third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisements. Next slide, please. Broadcasters and publishers of candidate or third-party ads must keep records for 4 years and make them available to the public during business hours. And those records must include the following things. For instance, the name of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, the contact details of the person dealing with the broadcaster or publisher on their behalf, a copy of the ad or a way to reproduce the ad, and the cost charged for running the ad. Next slide, please. So as promised earlier, now we can deal with financial statements in this part of the presentation. So under Section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act, every candidate has to file their Form 4 with the clerk, no matter how much they raised or spent, even if it was nothing. Your financial statement is due Tuesday, March 30th, 2027 by 2 p.m. If you think you won't make that deadline, you need to apply to the court for an extension before March 30th. Extensions cannot be requested after that fact. If you filed a nomination form, you are required to file a Form 4, even if you later withdrew or were acclaimed. This is another crucial point. The financial statement is required in all circumstances. If you registered as a third-party advertiser, you'll need to file Form 8 instead, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. Now, if you spot a mistake after filing, you can resubmit your financial statement to correct it, as long as it's done before the deadline. And finally, the clerk is required to publish a report showing which candidates filed their financial statements and which ones did not. Next slide, please. Candidates can file their financial statement anytime after voting day and up to December 31st, 2026, when their campaign ends. Just to clarify here, the deadline for financial statements, like I said in the last slide, isn't at the end of March, but December 31st is when your campaign typically ends, just in case there was any confusion about that part. Once the statement is filed, the campaign is officially over, and this is especially helpful for acclamations or campaigns with little or no spending involved, where folks want to kind of get that paperwork out of the way sooner. Now, third-party advertisers can file after an early withdrawal or any time after voting day up to December 31st, 2026, and clerks must report whether candidates met their filing requirements and post that information online or electronically by April 30th, following a regular election. After April 30th, 2027, clerks must also publish a list of all registered third-party advertisers and note whether they filed their required financial statement and auditor's report. Clerks can set their own rules for electronic filing of financial statements, so we do encourage you to speak with your clerk's department to confirm that aspect. Next slide, please. Just as a quick heads up, if your campaign expenses or contributions go over $10,000, you're required to hire an auditor. The auditor has to be properly licensed under the Public Accounting Act 2004. So this is really important to remember about that qualification. And do remember, your campaign financial statement is a public document, so it can be viewed by anyone. Next slide. You only get your nomination fee back if you file your financial statement on time. If you miss the deadline, you technically still have a 30-day grace period to file, but you'll need to pay a $500 late filing fee to the municipality. For this election, the grace period ends on April 29th, 2027. Filing during the grace period means you pay the $500 fee and you lose your nomination refund. So that's the nomination fee. It could be $100 if you're running for any council seat that's not head of council, and if you're running for the mayor's seat, that's the $200. So add that to the $500 and it can grow. It's very important to file on time. Candidates and third-party advertisers can fix and resubmit a financial statement to correct errors as long as it's done before the filing deadline. Next slide. Now, a few words about campaign surpluses. So, if you have money left over when you file your financial statement, you must pay the full surplus amount to the clerk. Before turning over the surplus, you can first get back any contributions you or your spouse personally made to the campaign, but no one else, just you or your spouse. The refund you can receive is limited to the smaller of the contribution amount or the surplus. The clerk holds surplus funds in trust in case they're needed for a compliance audit for both candidates and third-party advertisers. More on that later. And if the funds aren't needed for an audit, the surplus becomes the property of the municipality or the school board, depending which office you're running for. Next slide. Oh, possibly? Very well. Yeah, so we're just joking around for levity here, because this can be a bit of a heavy topic. Next slide, especially. Compliance and enforcement. Next slide, please. So the key takeaway on this slide is that every municipality and school board has a compliance audit committee. If an eligible voter reasonably believes you broke election finance rules, they can ask for a compliance audit of your campaign finances. The request has to be made in writing and explain why the individual thinks that the rules were broken. The request must be submitted to the municipal clerk who ran the election within 90 days, 90, of the campaign financial statement filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee reviews the request and decides whether to approve or reject it. You can appeal the committee's decision to the Superior Court of Justice within 15 days of the decision. And if someone doesn't apply to a compliance audit, for a compliance audit, they can still choose to take legal action on their own. So that's another important thing to remember. There's a way to go that route. Any prosecution related to the 2026 election must start by November 15th, 2030. Next slide, please. So what happens if a compliance audit request is granted? If the committee grants the application, it will appoint an auditor to conduct a compliance audit of your campaign finances. That's why good record keeping is crucial. The auditor is entitled to have access to all of your financial records related to your campaign, and the auditor will produce a report which you are also entitled to receive as a candidate. The Compliance Audit Committee will meet to consider the auditor's report, and if the report concludes that there is an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to commence legal action. But the important thing to clarify here is that the Compliance Audit Committee does not have any authority to set penalties. Only the courts can decide if you contravene the Act, and if so, which penalties should apply. Next slide. That being said, there are 3 contraventions of the Municipal Elections Act where penalties apply automatically. So for example, firstly, the first instance is if you fail to file a financial statement by the end of the 30-day grace period or fail to apply to the court before March 30th, 2027 for an extension by the filing deadline. The second instance is if your financial statement shows that you exceeded your spending limit. And the third instance is if you fail to turn over your surplus to the clerk when you file your financial statement. So what does this mean? The penalty is that you forfeit your office if you won the election, and you become ineligible to run or be appointed to fill a vacancy until after the 2030 election. Next slide. There are, of course, other penalties that may be applicable when we're talking about the Municipal Elections Act. And if you are convicted of an offense, you may be subject to the following penalties. So, for example, a fine of up to $25,000, ineligibility to vote for or run in the next general election, up to 6 months in prison, and forfeiture of your elected office if the judge finds that you committed the offense knowingly. I previously indicated that if you are convicted of exceeding the spending limit, you automatically will lose your seat. So in addition, you may also be fined the amount by which you exceeded that limit. Next slide, please. So at this stage, we're going to switch gears and move on to a slightly happier topic maybe, which is the voters list and proxy voting. Next slide, please. So very quickly, on this slide, we just want to acknowledge some somewhat recent legislative changes. And specifically, we'll talk about Elections Ontario, which is a nonpartisan agency that runs provincial elections and is overseen by the Chief Electoral Officer under the Election Act and the Election Finances Act. So while it doesn't run municipal elections, it does support them by providing accurate voter list information. So this is an important thing to note. And since January 1st, 2024, Elections Ontario has been responsible for preparing voter lists and managing a permanent register of electors for both provincial and municipal elections. Municipal voters lists are created using data from this permanent register. Elections Ontario works with local election officials to make sure they have the most up-to-date voter information possible. And voters can confirm, update, or add their information for both municipal and provincial elections by visiting registertovote.oon.ca. So that's all I wanted to say about this slide. Next one, please. Voters list. So the voters list becomes a public document on September 1st, 2026. As a candidate, you can request that the municipal clerk give you the part of the voters list that relates to the office that you're running for. And this request has to be made in writing. In order to receive the voters list from the municipal clerk, you must give the clerk a written acknowledgement of the following things. So, firstly, that you will only use the list for electoral purposes and not for commercial ones. Secondly, that you are bound by the restrictions in the Municipal Elections Act relating to handling of the voters list. And thirdly, that you will only share the list with others, such as campaign workers, after obtaining a similar written acknowledgement from them. Next slide, please. So, you are the only person who may share the voters list. If you have given someone a copy, they are not allowed to share it further. Like, we're trying to contain the spread of this private information. So you must keep a track of who you shared the voters list with. If you give someone a physical copy of it, they must return the copy to you. If you share an electronic copy, they must destroy the copy and provide you with written acknowledgement that the copy has been destroyed. You cannot keep copies of the voters list after your campaign has ended, and on or before the day your campaign ends, you must do the following things. So this is another list. You must destroy the copy of the voters list that you received from the clerk, have any printed copies you shared with other people returned to you so you can destroy them, and ensure you have received written acknowledgments from anyone who received an electronic copy of the voters list that electronic copy has been destroyed. Next slide. So more on written acknowledgments. Before you share the voters list with someone, you must obtain a written acknowledgement from that individual. So that written acknowledgement must confirm the following: that they will only use the list for electoral purposes and not for commercial ones, just like you as the candidate. They will not share or give copies of the list to anybody else. If they receive a physical copy of the list, they will return the copy to you. And again, if they receive an electronic copy of the list, they will destroy the copy and give you a written confirmation that they destroyed that electronic copy. The written acknowledgement should set out the dates by which people must return physical copies or give you written confirmation that the electronic copies have been destroyed. So this is a very solid practice to use. You must keep records of the written acknowledgements that you received until November 15th, 2030, when the next council or school board takes office. You must also keep any written confirmations that electronic copies of the list have been destroyed. Next slide, please. So right now we're going to jump to scrutineers. And the important thing to note here is that this slide, again, like the city staff were saying, is general and it covers the entire province, so different municipalities. The city has its own approach because the city has, I believe, a telephone and electronic voting. The scrutineer process would be very different from an election where they have traditional voting places where somebody can come in and physically, keep an eye on voting. So we won't really dive into this slide too much. We'll leave it to city staff to kind of walk you through that when it's their turn, just because of how unique their approach is and how it's different from this slide. So let's just quickly skip to the next one. A few words about recounts in a municipal election. So a recount is automatic if the vote is tied. So this is the first piece of information to underline. Councils have the option also of establishing policies prior to the election that allow for an automatic recount. And councils still retain the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. Another thing to note here is that an eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declaration of results. Next slide, please. In the course of this presentation, we enumerated many different deadlines, timelines. This slide provides a snapshot of some of the key ones. It's not completely comprehensive, but these are some of the most important deadlines to be mindful of, such as voting day on Monday, October 26th. There's also the candidate's campaign period that starts when they file their nomination and runs until December 31st, 2026. This is the only time candidates can accept contributions or spend campaign funds. That's why it's so critical to note those dates. A third-party advertiser's campaign period starts once their registration is certified, again, as early as May 1st, 2026, and also ends on December 31st, 2026. So again, as I mentioned earlier, financial statements are due to the clerk's office by Tuesday, March 30th, 2026 at 2 p.m. And this applies to all candidates and third-party advertisers, even if they didn't raise or spend any money. Next slide, please. So this is a really helpful slide because it provides hyperlinks to additional information that you can review as you prepare for your campaign. For example, you have the Municipal Elections Act hyperlink from the ELAW's website. This is, again, the central piece of legislation that you may want to refer to directly. There's the Municipal Act. It speaks to some of the concepts Lilith described earlier about municipal governance and the role of council and staff, including the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act and Education Act if you're looking at school board trustee elections. But we're also very excited to share that our ministry has produced 3 free online election guides for this election for candidates, voters, and third-party advertisers. A lot of the information in our deck today is sourced from that material in a summarized fashion. So if you visit those guides, you can actually do extra reading and find a lot of helpful information that goes a little bit further than we did in this presentation. There's also the Municipal Councilor's Guide, which can provide you with supplementary information about what it means to be a council member. And it deals with all sorts of topics ranging from governance to administration to municipal finance. It's worth reading. And lastly, there's the Municipal World website. That website is another location that you may wish to visit. They have some literature there for elections, but I understand, and don't quote me on this, but I understand there may be some cost involved. So oftentimes we encourage folks to look at our guides first, the Municipal Elections Act, which are all there for you free of charge. So if you skip 2 slides to our contact information at the end here. So as Lilith was mentioning earlier in the presentation, again, we're not lawyers, we're not policy folks. When we answer questions, we tend to stick to some of the more high-level foundational topics, but oftentimes when you're running a campaign, there are gray area questions that you want some guidance on naturally. So we encourage you to write into us. You have our email addresses there on the screen, and I understand that the city will be making our deck available. So you can visit the city's website also and find all of this information, including our email addresses, and just contact us by email, myself and or Lilith, and we will provide you with a response in writing for your records, which can be very helpful. So on that note, I want to thank you for your attention. This was a lot. And to turn it over to city staff to take you the rest of the way. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Peter. That was very informative. I think we were all, very enlightened by a couple things. Even us where some of us are a little old hat to municipal elections, but every time we hear a presentation from the ministry, I think we're always reminded, oh, we should look that up. We should double check that. So now we're going to transition into the City of Kawartha Lakes' presentation, and we're just going to discuss about how some of that legislation and how the pieces that Peter and Lilith provided, how they apply to us here in Kawartha Lakes. And so we're going to be discussing staff resources, some tools and resources to you, talk a little bit more about the voters list and how critical that is, internet and telephone voting, as well as some key bylaws, policies, legislation, and just discuss our election website. But before I forget, I know Peter did mention 2 things specifically. The scrutineer role, I don't think we have a slide on it, but everyone who's registered as a candidate, we do discuss the scrutineer role and how it applies in an internet telephone voting election. There is a specific form for appointing a scrutineer, and they have specific functions that they can do. If you refer to your candidate's binder, I think most everyone in here is a registered candidate, but for those online, you will get one in a candidate's binder, but that scrutineer document does explain how they can be involved in an internet voting election. The other thing too that we wanted to mention was the guides. What we find is Peter highlighted the candidates guide. That's the teal and the blue guides, the candidates and the voters guide that were also provided to all candidates in their binders. They're excellent. Oftentimes when you ask us questions, we're copying and pasting directly out of those guides, especially when it comes to things like campaign finances, because those rules are standard across Ontario, and those guides are so fulsome and detailed, and they give some good kind of explanatory bits. We'll be referring to those guides quite a bit. Our own candidates guide does delve into some other topics, and so we're going to hit on a couple of those today. So we'll move to the next slide, Sarah. So for those of you, just as a refresher, who is involved here in the municipal election? Well, Kathy Ritchie, City Clerk, she's the returning officer. So she has that function, a dual function as City Clerk and also as returning officer for the municipal election. As Deputy Clerk, Sarah and myself act as Deputy Returning Officers. And then we have an election supervisor, Lois Jackson, who also comes from the world of clerking and has clerked in other municipalities in Ontario, as well as she's been a CAO. She's a wealth of experience. And so she will be assisting with a lot of those election functions throughout the municipal election process. And then the election auditor, Sarah Bukaboom, she's our Director of Corporate Services here at the city. So she will be conducting specific auditing roles to make sure that the voting system is acting as expected, and she will be doing some double checks throughout our process to make sure that things are adding up the way they should be. We'll also have various election assistants. So basically every member of customer service, the customer experience staff, who you may be familiar with at our municipal service centers in Lindsay, Omimi, Bobcaygeon, and Kobukok. All of them will be appointed as election assistants. So they will be able to, during the election period, issue new voting PIN letters and help people get registered to vote in the election period. But there is also assistance available from select libraries. Those librarians at those libraries will be appointed to assist electors in voting. So all the municipal service centers and select libraries throughout Kawartha Lakes will have kiosks, and the election assistants will be entitled to assist an elector with voting using that touchscreen kiosk. So they might go in and actually type in the PIN number and help them type in their birth date information, and then move away from the screen during the voting process. And so they all will be sworn in as oaths, and that information will be provided to us. And the last group of election assistants that the city will have will be likely mostly all city staff as well, usually from our Records and Archives division, and they will assist eligible electors at eligible retirement homes and at Ross Memorial Hospital, where we will be making sure that they are all visited twice during the municipal election period to make sure that all of the residents of long-term care and at the hospital have the opportunity to vote if they want. And so we'll have people going there and assisting those folks also with voting on a touchscreen device that they can move around quite easily. So those are the staff that you'll be seeing throughout the municipal election period. Notably, you will note that the CAO's name isn't on this list. The CAO is quite pleased to be quite separate from the election process. He doesn't have to get involved with that, so he can keep maintaining the day-to-day processes of the municipality. And so oftentimes if you ask him a question about the election, he'll just direct it to Kathy and her team. So that's the staff resources as they get involved. There are, next slide, a number of tools that we want to point out to you. So as Peter indicated, the voters list this year is a brand new voters list. Elections Ontario created this from scratch. So it's important to note that everyone who thinks that they were on the voters list before, that they double check to make sure that they're on the list. So there is that website right now, registertovoteon.ca. That is the website that Elections Ontario is using to allow electors to make sure and verify that they're still on the voters list. They compile their voters list from a number of different resources, and they have a lot better access to the resources than the previous creator of the voters list, which was MPAC. And so they've been doing a very good job at piecing together data from the Ministry of Health, the Registrar General, Ministry of Transportation, Elections Canada. They're piecing together these resources to build the voters list. But it is new to them because they've only had to do one elector can exist in the province for provincial elections, but now because a municipal election, it's possible that an elector can vote in multiple municipalities depending on how many properties they own as an individual. That is new to them, so we want everyone to make sure to double check that they're on that list, especially if they're a seasonal property owner. Elections Ontario has been doing some really focused targeting on particularly that group of electors right now. But if you're out speaking with seasonal electors, they're entitled to vote at home. Say if they live in Toronto, they're also entitled to vote here if they own a property in Kawartha Lakes or are the spouse of the owner of the property. There is online election services that we will be using with VoterView, which is operated by a company called DataFix, and that's what we'll be using to maintain the voters list once we receive the the preliminary list of electors from Elections Ontario. So that's what our staff will be using during the voting period to create new PIN letters and to be adding last-minute electors to the voters list. So that's a product we're using. Internet telephone voting, we'll be using Simply Voting as our voting provider. They were new to us in the 2025 Ward 5 by-election, but they are not new to municipal elections in Ontario. They have provided internet voting solutions, internet telephone voting solutions for now decades, and over 75 municipalities in Ontario will be using their services for the online tool. So we don't operate that tool, we customize it, and then Simply Voting maintains and hosts that. They are a Canadian company, and we're very happy to be working with them, and we're quite pleased with how things worked out in the Ward 5 by-election. It was very seamless, and we hope that things will maintain the same. Notices and PIN letters will be mailed through Canada Post via Taylor Demers. So it's all a coordinated function because over 200 municipalities are only internet or telephone or mail-in voting. So there's a lot of mail being sent out across Ontario during that time. So Canada Post will be very busy. We'll be testing their limits again, and Taylor Demers is actually the one who prints the letters, stuffs them, and gives them to Canada Post. And then our Kawartha Lakes election website includes information, schedules, updates, and how-to videos. If you haven't visited it yet, please do so. We're constantly making updates as we learn more finished details about the elections, and you'll want to make sure that you're visiting that. That's www.kawarthalakes.ca/election. Next slide. There is other information opportunities. So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, thank you for coming today. This is the big one. It will be recorded on YouTube, so anyone can go back and watch this video. And for those who are exclusively watching this video online today, welcome. Thank you for joining us. There will be also other voter information videos that will be posted on the city's election website that were produced by Simply Voting that walk people through what that voting experience is going to look like. Some people think that internet telephone voting is new. We used it in the 2022 election and the 2018 municipal election and the 2025 by-election. So this is our third, or really our fourth election using electronic voting method again. And previous to that, if anyone asks you, well, why don't I vote at the school anymore? You do. You still do for provincial and federal elections. You will still vote in that method, but municipal elections haven't had a traditional polling station model since before amalgamation. The first election in Kawartha Lakes in 2001 was conducted by mail-in voting only. So everyone was mailed a paper ballot. So the traditional polling station model that people remember, they're probably remembering a federal or provincial election and not a municipal election. We will also be at pop-up locations at community events. Some of you have already seen us at some of those events, and we're great. We're very happy to be in the community. I know that this weekend we're going to be at the Lavender Festival in Little Britain, as well as the Classics on Kent, but we'll also be at various farmers markets and other events throughout Kawartha Lakes, and you might see myself, Lois, or Sarah through there, and we'll be reminding people to check to make sure that they're on the voters list, and that will be our job. And don't forget the voting period, 9 a.m. on October 16th. That's when voting opens, and then that continues until 8 p.m. That's when all voting across Ontario for every municipal election ends 8 p.m. on October 26, 2026. So voting help centers. They're not traditional polling stations, but they will be provided. So they will be provided at City Hall and customer service centers at Bobcaygeon, Coboconk, Omimi, and obviously here in City Hall in Lindsay. And they will have a number of voting kiosks, and they will allow people to register to vote. If they didn't get a PIN letter, they need one, they can go to these voting help centers and get a new PIN letter printed off if they didn't get one in October. They are open regular office hours, the customer service centers, but there will be additional Saturday service from 9 to 1 p.m. at City Hall here only. And so if anyone does need to get a new PIN letter on Saturday, we will be open here at City Hall. We make it a priority. It's not a very busy day for us, but anyone who needs to, can't make it to one of those places during the normal office hours will be able to speak with us on the Saturday. Then we do have the additional voting kiosks, the touchscreen devices that people can use to vote if they don't have a device that they're comfortable voting with at home. And those will be located at Bethany, Dalton and Seabright, Fenelon Falls, Kinmount, Kirkfield, Lindsay, Little Britain, and Woodville libraries. And so those particular libraries will have a kiosk, but it's important to note that they will only be open regular library hours only, and this is a specification from the library board. They're happy to help during their office hours or their regular branch hours, but we can't force them to stay open until 8 p.m. on voting day. And so they will be open, though, during the voting period. Now, all other libraries will be able to get other basic election information. We'll have a copy of the voters list. And anyone who wants to use a public access computer, that's the normal computers at those libraries, will be able to vote on those if they're comfortable doing so. And a librarian may offer some assistance. There's also free Wi-Fi there at the library. So if someone has bad internet connection at home, but they want to vote on their own device, they can do so at a library. So we'll move to the next slide. So we've mentioned the voters list and how that is being created by Elections Ontario. So that is the website where people can confirm or update their electoral information, to add an elector, especially if they're a new elector. Maybe they just turned 18. That's an important job for young voters. And that is the information that's used to create the preliminary list of electors. The PLE, the preliminary list of electors, is something that will be supplied to all candidates as of September 1st. And you've already indicated as signed registered candidates how you would like to receive that voters list when you signed or you submitted your paperwork. And so on September 1st, if you ask for a paper copy, we'll have one ready for you. And if you ask for the electronic version or both, the electronic version will be sending out password creation emails to you, and you'll get an opportunity to create a password for the online copy of the voters list that all candidates are entitled to. The online list is quite an accessible tool because you're able to search for a name to verify whether or not someone's on the list. It'll show you exactly if they're on the list, as well as you could search a street name and it'll show you all the electors on a street. As well as during the voting period, you'll be able to see whether or not an elector has voted. You can't see how an elector has voted, but you're able to verify whether or not your supporters have voted. And that's an important thing to do because that replaces the old scrutineer method of sitting at the polling station, marking off your list, saying, oh, Mrs. Jane Smith has come in to vote, and obviously no one's seen how she votes. But there is that opportunity that you will have to verify whether or not someone has voted. And this is a particularly important tool to use for those who are voting by telephone. Voting by telephone is a longer process to use. You still call in, use your touchtone phone or your regular cell phone device. It is a bit longer because you have to listen to all the various instructions. If you vote for mayor only and hang up, that vote is not counted. So it's important that electors vote through all the steps when they're voting through telephone. And if they said, oh yes, I voted by telephone, that's a good one to double check to make sure they really did vote, to use that electronic voters list to make sure that their vote was actually cast. Because their vote isn't cast until they voted in the mayor race, the councillor race, and potentially the school board trustee race as well. So that's important for everyone to note. It is a good system. It's just a bit slower. So if we would recommend efficiency for anyone, we would advise that it is best to use an internet. It's a little bit faster and it's quite nice to be able to see. There is the voter view system, and that's for the online voter service and registration. There's also the candidates access portal that is run by DataFix as well. And it is important to note here that it is the duty of electors to register to vote. Candidates are prohibited from harvesting voter registrations and votes. By that, we mean going door to door with your iPad saying, here's the register to vote website, please register to vote. Or going door to door saying, here's the voting website, get me your PIN letter, let's vote here right now. That's intimidation, and that's largely something that we would discourage. If voters need assistance, direct them to us. We will help them. That's our job. Your job is to make sure your supporters voted, and you have those tools to make sure that yes or no they have voted. But if they haven't, then you can certainly refer them to us, and we will offer that assistance if need be. So it is their responsibility to vote. And what we often find is every elector who wants to vote finds a way to vote. They will make sure that their vote is cast. And we're happy to take those calls, especially if they're having any difficulty. But on election day, don't wait. Don't tell them to call. Go to a municipal election service center They will all be open till 8 o'clock on election night. City Hall will be open till 8 o'clock on election night. But the 4 service centers in Kawartha Lakes are the place you want to go because the phones will be busy. We may not be able to get to everyone every second. So if they need assistance and they waited till the very last minute, go to a municipal service center for best assistance. Next slide. So the voting period, again, for internet telephone voting is from October 16th at 9 a.m. to Monday, October 26th at 8 p.m. So computers, tablets, mobile, landline, touch-tone phones are all eligible sources of ways that people can vote. So they can use their touch-tone phone if they want. They can use a smartphone. They can use an iPad, a laptop, anything with a mobile browser can also be used, and that's through Simply Voting. We'll be doing some tests to verify all the different tools to make sure that they're working as expected. In the by-election, when we were using Simply Voting, we were quite pleased with how well the system works on a variety of devices. And so, and like we said, we're not the only one using the system. 75 municipalities will be using Simply Voting's electronic voting system. And like we said, out of the 444, over 200 are using electronic voting, especially when it comes to cottage country, if you will, in areas that have a high seasonal elector population, because all of those electors who don't live here, we're around 10,000 electors who don't live here. They live somewhere else. They have the equal right to vote, and by offering them a convenient, accessible way to vote is a very easy and effective way to make sure that their ballots are cast. There is a how-to video, though, for those who are thinking about what does that actually look like, and we do have that YouTube link, and that will be in the slide deck, and it will be on our website as well. And then in-person access to voting kiosks, iPad touchscreens, assistance is provided for electors uncomfortable using these devices. And we often find that, like, when we offer assistance, we'll touch their PIN number in and help them with their birth date information in. And then when they go through the voting process and we stand back and we just say, all right, touch the person, the name of the person you want to vote, they're often quite pleased at how easy it actually is. And there's a lot of smiles, and we'll try to give them a sticker saying I voted. So it is a good experience if they need to, and they are happy to come to those assistance locations. So next slide. There are a number of policies, bylaws, and legislation. Peter referenced many of them. The Municipal Elections Act, that's that major piece of legislation that really guides much of our conversations today. But we do want to highlight the use of corporate resources policy, which we're going to touch on in a bit. The election recount policy. The City of Kawartha Lakes does have one. We will mention briefly to you about what that policy looks like in actuality when you are registering to vote. The use of the voters list policy, that's that policy that Peter was referring to. You have to commit to only using it for electoral purposes. You can't use the voters list for any other commercial purposes. The Ministry of Transportation has specific rules and regulations as well for election sign placement on provincial highways, that being Highway 7, 35, 7A, and the 115 in Kawartha Lakes. Those are the only provincial highways that are regulated by those regulations. I haven't seen any updated regulations from them yet, so we're just using the old regulations thus far. And then the election sign bylaw, which gets all the questions. It seems to be the point of conversation. So next slide. We're just going to briefly touch on the election sign bylaw. So they're unique depending on every municipality in Ontario. So there's no provincial regulations. Don't bother asking Lilith and Peter about election signs. They're just going to tell you, call us. So election signs, you can refer those questions directly to us. Now, election signs for the municipal election may be placed on roadways and public property, that would be alongside the roadways between August 27th, 2026 and October 31st. So that's your period for placing election signs on the road allowances. Private property is effective from the date of the candidate's nomination until October 31st. So those electors who want to place a candidate's sign on their front lawn, as an example, make sure it's behind the utility poles. It's fully off the city's road allowance. That's something that people often get confused about. Where does my front lawn start? So it's usually behind where the utility poles are, telephone poles, or the bell boxes that you'll see. If it's on the front lawn, that's legally placed. If it's on the boulevard in front of their sidewalk, that's illegally placed, and we would just ask them to move it back. But signs can be placed as of right now on private property. So just be sure that if you're giving out signs to your supporters, that you're doing so and making sure that, as of right now, make sure that they're keeping them on their private property. After that, the regulation of sign on public property is quite prescribed. There's a lot of very specific rules and regulations that are largely based off of safety. So we want to make sure that the signs are placed in a safe manner, so that way we're not obstructing any sight lines or views of traffic, especially at intersections. So you'll want to read those regulations, and that's why there's limits on how big signs can be, so that they're not blocking any driver's line of sight. But there is also a very common place for people to place signs are those curb separated medians, particularly in Victoria Avenue and Lindsay. Only one sign may be placed in those per block. And there are some other limitations on there. It used to be one sign per island. Now it's one sign per block. And no signs may be placed adjacent to municipal facilities and schools. So there's no signs placed in front of parks or in front of City Hall or municipal service centers. Keep those things far away from anything that might have a City of Kawartha Lake sign on it. Fire stations, things like that. Those are all municipal facilities, so keep the signs away from those. There is regulation about allowable sizes for election signs, so double check to make sure before you build or get your signs purchased that you're making sure that the sign is in the right size and that you're not building a sign too large. Also, placement proximity in relation to other election signs. We know you want to place signs by other candidate signs. Be thoughtful, do the right thing, place them at a good distance. There is regulations about how far they need to be placed away from each other. You don't want to be caught as a person who's moved someone else's sign and get labeled as a thief or anything like that. If you see a sign that is potentially a hazard, you can call the candidate directly and do the right thing and just say, hey, I think your sign is in a wrong spot. Are you okay if I move it? Or did you want to move it? Just be aware of the proximity locations. And for instance, you can't place your sign immediately in front of someone else's sign. And that's just, there are rules about how far apart they have to be. There are removal of signs for non-compliance and or after the election sign period, which is October 31st. And there are penalties for failure to remove signs. So we'll give you some reminders after the election to say, heads up, please remove your signs by the end of Halloween. I know you'll all be out there removing your signs well dressed in costume. So that's the election sign bylaw. Read it thoroughly. There's a lot of details in it that are quite specific about the types of sign placement regulations. The other one that we really want to highlight to you is the use of corporate resources policy. Now, to remain neutral, the municipality and school boards are prohibited from using our resources to support or oppose any specific candidate. We have to remain neutral, otherwise Peter's department is going to start calling us. And so we want to make sure that the provincial government is and their legislation is complied with. And the way we do this is through the use of corporate resources policy. Now, specific to Kawartha Lakes, there are different rules for school board trustee. Each of the school boards have their own use of corporate resources policy, and that may apply to you if you're placing or if you're campaigning in and around a school. Double check those if that's the case, but for Kawartha Lakes, there is no campaigning at city facilities, including parks, buildings, or workplaces where city staff may be involved. So we want to make sure you're quite clear that the city must remain politically neutral, and campaigning in a city facility is considered a violation of that policy. No political advertising in municipal publications. So if you could advertise on the hockey boards, that's not prohibited for election purposes, or on city bulletin boards. You'll see them throughout various buildings, libraries, things like that. You can't place your vote for me poster on those signs. No using municipal resources for campaigning. Those would be things like images that the city owns. So images from our website and pictures that our communication staff took, those are prohibited from using in any election materials. You cannot use city vehicles if you have access to one, or city computers to conduct your campaigning. So just make sure that those municipal resources are only for municipal purposes. There are specific rules about all candidates' meetings at city-owned community halls. And that's because we know that in Kawartha Lakes, there's sometimes the only community hall is the one owned by the city. And so if you wanted to, or if a group was organizing an all candidates meeting, there are specific rules that they have to comply with if they're hosting that meeting in a city facility. Usually those get vetted by our Parks Department through our office, and we'll just say, make sure that these rules are complied with. Things like making sure that everyone's invited, and that there's no excessive campaigning on site, but obviously a debate or whatever would be hosted and organized by another organization likely. There are prohibitions for city staff from assisting with campaigns while working or while wearing their uniforms, badges, or logos. City's logo is protected, and so that cannot appear in any of your campaign material. And so we'll want to make sure that the same would apply for uniforms or badges. And city staff have to be, if they want to get involved with your campaign, which is a possibility, it's their right to still be involved with campaigns. They can only do so after work hours. They cannot, you can't call them during the work hours and say, hey, can you look this up for me? That would be a violation of this policy. There are limits to current council members' spending. So those of you who are active councillors have specific limits to your spending, and the types of resources that you have access to is limited, just to make sure that it's a level playing field between the active councillors and those who are running for office. And so current councillors have some specific limits about what they can and cannot do with their traditional councillor budgets. There are other prohibitions to using current or inactive municipal logos or brandings in campaign material, and this specifically includes using imagery of City Hall in any campaign material. So that is specific to our use of corporate resources policy. And like we said, if you're campaigning in and around public schools, those school boards will have a use of corporate resources policy that is specific to them. I think next slide, we have the election website. Like we said, if you haven't looked at it already, it's got some really great information. It's your source of current information, schedules, and messaging. It's also the most up-to-date feature of that is the candidates list. So who is running? We try to update those by the end of day every day, so that way you can see exactly who is running for office in every specific office, who's running against you, or if someone has withdrawn. That information all gets collected on our city's election website. There are other tools there for inclusion and correction of the voters list. There's access to the candidates portal and online voting that would be available online, as well as there's some really good information about ward boundaries. You can check the city's ward boundary information, as this would be important to note that you can only place an election sign within the ward that you're running in. So if you're unclear, the ward boundaries are drawn in such a way that they're not always obvious. They're usually halfway through a concession or a lot. And so it's not always like they end at a road necessarily. Some do, but there's a lot that are more ambiguous. Using that online ward boundaries tool, you can put in an address and it will tell you which ward that property is registered to. So there's elector information, voter registration, as well as the general City of Kawartha Lakes website has general city information that may be interesting to you regarding municipal services, strategic planning, finances, and budgeting. And so you want to make sure that you're checking those manuals and guides in our website. Now, if you have specific questions about the election after today, we want to make sure you write down this address. It's election@kawarthalakes.ca. And we'll take those questions there, and we usually respond in such a way so that all four of us can see how we responded to that. And so we want to make sure that if you direct those questions to that email address, we all have access to that email address. And so if someone's on vacation or away for the day, you don't have to wait. That response can come through there. So that's questions about the election. Now, if you have questions about the corporation of the City of Kawartha Lakes, the actual business that the municipality does, the contact information there is for Mr. Pettigrew and B. Pettigrew at kawarthalakes.ca, and he's the executive assistant to Sarah Bukaboom, who's our director of corporate services, and he will take those questions and vet them through to the various departments. So if you hear a fact, for instance, stated during the campaign and you think, that doesn't sound right to me, if you're a little unsure about some of these facts about what the municipality is doing in their budgets or their long-term plans, and you're curious about, what service is being offered, that we want to direct to the to the Office of Corporate Services, and that way they can respond, and then we're not getting involved with that kind of thing. On a rare occasion, a question may result in a Freedom of Information request, but that's going to be our office that has to respond to that. So hopefully it doesn't involve that. Now, last thing, we do have other resources that are available on the table. There's some postcards that we're handing out so that you can see what they look like when we're going to the fairs. We have buck slips that are those little paper slips that are presented by Elections Ontario. And then we have some stickers and pins and things. One of the things that we have there is that little notebook. What's on the front cover of that notebook? A city logo. So make sure that if you're using that notebook, we want you to use it today for taking notes and jotting down information about the campaign, but don't include it in your election advertising. because that includes the city logo. So we're avoiding the use of that logo throughout our advertising. If you do have questions about that, direct them to us, and we'll probably copy and paste a section of that use of corporate resources policy or some other policy in regards to that. So I think that covers most of our presentation today, and we've got about 10 minutes available left over for questions from the public. If you have a question right now, please keep it to broader questions that might be helpful to everyone. It's not a specific question unique to your campaign only. If you have questions about one of the slides perhaps that Peter or Lilith presented, this is a good time to ask that. But if you have a unique specific question to your campaign, it might be better suited for a conversation after we conclude the meeting. So does anyone have any questions? Mark? All right. I'll just hit the button on there so that people on YouTube can hear. Thanks. It's at the very base of the, yeah. There it is. Yep.
Sorry, thank you. I noticed, Joel, earlier you made the statement to avoid having any photos of City Hall in campaign materials. Does that extend to other facilities such as an arena or a community hall somewhere else in the city of Kawartha Lakes?
I think the specific clause in the use of corporate resources is very specific to City Hall. But that being said, it's very difficult to take pictures of the other facilities in your campaign advertising without including some other kind of branding or logo. And so we would just avoid it for clarity. If you can at all possible, just take pictures that would include things that aren't including city facilities, just to be avoiding any possibility of a violation. So, Jennifer?
Thank you. My question is for Peter. In regards to campaign contributions for volunteers on our team, if my friend is a chartered accountant and I said, can you be my financial person? And he said yes. From what I understood, I would be asking him, okay, how much do you charge per hour? And the time that he spends writing up or keeping track of all the expenses, that would be considered his contribution to the campaign, even though there wasn't actually any exchange of paper money or a check. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's my understanding. So generally, volunteers helping your campaign, that's not considered a contribution. But if it's a professional, like a lawyer or an accountant, where they would normally be paid for their service, that would. So in this case, my understanding is that it's something that you would need to treat as a contribution, even though there's no money exchanging hands, but whatever that person charges their clients for their services would be on paper deemed a contribution to your campaign.
And so I'm expecting, I didn't look through the whole financial form yet, but is there a specific location for that on the form?
It is, I believe, addressed in the form and the candidates guide. So if you have a look at the candidates guide, it'll take you to those. Like, it actually tells you where to put things in the form. So we would suggest having a quick look at that. I can't remember off the top of my head just now, but if you can't find it, please do write in, and we will have a look and give you some more guidance on that. But the short answer is that yes, you would have to report that as a contribution if it's professional volunteering. And it's also a campaign expense as well, so on your side.
Oh, okay, so it's like a wash.
So it's one of those things, yeah. But again, if you would like to have a look at the guide, it might answer that question in more detail. And if it doesn't answer all your questions, we can chat offline and maybe we can find some more information for you. But that's
Okay,
response.
thank you.
Thank you.
I was just going to add another profession that often gets grouped into that is a graphic designer. Tends to be one that often gets questioned about. So if they're regularly paid for their graphic design work, then that's the same kind of lawyer, accountant, professional activity.
Oh, okay, thank you. And I have one other question, if I may. When does the mailer go out with the PIN numbers? Is there a specific date?
Yeah, so we're aiming for the very end of September. And so we would anticipate those PIN letters to be arriving the first week of October. So likely when people receive them, the voting period won't be open. And so they would try to go to the website. It will say the voting doesn't open until October 16th. And so they'll have to hold their PIN letters in a safe place. Inevitably, there will be several who will lose their PIN letter, go to a municipal service center to obtain one. There is also an online registration option that would be available where electors who don't get a PIN letter could register online and potentially receive one in a secure email environment. But we'd want to make sure for the most expedient fashion to always attend a municipal service center in person.
Okay, thank you very much.
So would a volunteer CPA, for example, be limited to, let's say they charge $100 an hour, would they be limited to 12 hours of volunteer time?
So you basically would treat it, the way I understand it, as if you were hiring this person for your campaign, even though you're not actually exchanging any money, but you would be recording it in your financial statement as a contribution and an expense. And you would be looking at the fair market value for that service. So whatever is common and is charged, you would record that even if there's no financial exchanges happening with you and your friend who's the CPA.
Okay. I understand that part, but
okay.
There's a limit of $1,200 per contribution. Is it not? Okay. So again. Okay, there we go. So, but there's a limit for individuals to donate to a campaign of $1,200.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So would they be tapped out on how much they can help?
So yeah, you would have to stay within those limits. So you'd have to make sure that you don't exceed the contribution limit. So you're correct.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
So next question is mileage. I'm in Ward 1, and it's 25 miles across, or thereabouts, I would guess. If I drive to an event or whatever, is that an expense?
So that's a tricky one, and we are asked about this on occasion. And in specific instances like that, because there are also other examples like cell phone bills related to your campaign, or even printing something at Staples, like brochures for your campaign, if that's how to track that and how to report that, and is that an expense? At that point, we were unable to comment on those like one-off instances because they're specific. And we do encourage folks to, if they're in doubt, to seek independent legal advice, because you're not compelled to. You could kind of make that determination on your own if you think, okay, this may be challenged in a compliance audit committee. I may want to record this. I may want to treat this as an expense. That option's available to you. But if you're worried that, oh, like I'm not really sure if this qualifies or not, you may want to check with a lawyer, because again, unfortunately, we can't comment on specific one-off instances like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a one-off. I think everyone's going to have to drive.
That's fair. It's just not something that we can't comment on.
Okay.
We can say explicitly that there is no explicit line for mileage on Form 4. However, you could write it in, and in the past, we have recommended that people review other financial statements that have been submitted to potentially gain some insight as to what might be the regular practice. And that has been the city's response on this. Likewise too, if you're not sure if it's an expense or not, the city won't make that determination for you. The province won't make that determination for you. It's up to you to make that justification and then record it as appropriate.
Thank you. I guess a question for Peter. You kind of went over, do you have any do's or don'ts for e-transfers?
Oh, e-transfers. We don't normally comment about e-transfers, but what we do kind of emphasize is the importance of being able to track key information about who is contributing to your campaign. We have to be able to track that information in case it's ever challenged. And everything has to go to your campaign bank account. So those are like the high-level guidance that we provide. But in terms of e-transfers, we don't typically get into that level of detail. Once again, it falls on the candidate to be compliant. However, again, the key message is that it has to be super transparent, and you have to be comfortable that you would be able to demonstrate exactly where it came from, who made the contribution, whether it's an eligible one. So that kind of stuff is sometimes difficult to track with e-transfers. That's why it can be a bit of a difficult area.
Hardly anybody uses checks anymore.
That's fair.
Yeah, and we would specify, like, when using an e-transfer, there's got to be some way that you can record the name and the address, because those are required on the financial statement. A check is a great way to do it. Not everyone has checks anymore, but you have to have some kind of tool available to you to obtain their address information in particular, and to confirm that it came from a personal account, not a corporate account. And that's a real risk of getting the e-transfer. It often does say a name, but is it quite clear that it's coming from Joe Smith or Joe Smith's excavating company? Because his company can't donate to your campaign, but he can, so long as he's a resident in Ontario. So I think that concludes our time for today. We did want to honor the 6 o'clock time, but we are going to be available for individual questions, and we're happy to chat with the folks here. So we want to thank everyone for coming today. Please feel free to grab a couple more of those resources, but we're happy to chat with you to discuss any other specific questions that you may have. Thank you for coming, everyone.